Welcome, and let's take a closer look here at our first essay outlines for this week and how we can go about demonstrating our understanding of course concepts up to this point, some of the processes and learning that we've taken part in. I feel that having essay exams preceded by essay outlines is a fair and transparent way of assessing and for us all to demonstrate what we've learned. And we'll take a closer look here at how we can do that through essay prompts. After we submit outlines for all of these, next week you will write a essay exam on just one of these prompts. So this is a really great opportunity to develop this skill of creating an outline, diving deeper into key questions that surround material that you're learning, and to then provide a more thorough explanation and illustration as well with graphics that you'll be providing next week, or at least referencing from materials that we've engaged with. But first, to focus in here on our essay outlines, you'll see that the very first point that we have included is please upload an essay outline for each of the following prompts all in a single document. So we need one outline for each of these, making 5 outlines, but feel free to have them all in one Word document. And so we begin with, why would a student of humankind invest in the study of geography? Invest in the case of become engaged with, or take a course in, or even outside of an academic environment. Why would someone take interest even in the field of geography? And hopefully after these first 5 weeks of the semester, 6 weeks really diving in, we can begin to approach this question from different angles. As with all of these questions, we can try to look at them from different vantage points and incorporate some of what we've learned from the textbook, from my lectures, especially from the dialogues that we've had in the discussion boards around the mini lectures, and then also your own understandings as well. So feel free to include all 3 of those areas, as well as information that you're gaining from other courses or other media sources that are reputable and legitimate. We go on to say in this prompt, assess the strengths of geography as a subject and provide examples of how geographic awareness is utilized well in certain cases and in others ignored. So each week we provide examples, both students and myself, of how we could understand that geography, as we say here, is utilized well or demonstrates good geography. I've mentioned in a few posts, as well as at other times being ignored, which we could call that geo ignorami, being a noun of a, expressing ignorance towards geography. So environmental pollution, especially in a flagrant way. This could range all the way to racial prejudice, other in terms of mobility, in human migrations topics that we've covered. This could include, barriers to free mobility, and with how geographic awareness is utilized well or demonstrating good geography. We've looked at various examples of environmental conservation, the encouragement of multicultural collaboration, in terms of mobility again, how people have collaborated to produce more fluid and smooth forms of migrations. And so segueing from there, we talk about how should any academic discipline ignore geography? And this is where you really get to create a thesis statement and take a positioned, argumentative, and take a stance on how you feel about that based on what you've learned about geography and the points that we've looked at about the ways in which geography illustrates interdependence of humans and their environments, how geography reveals patterns in human and natural processes, and what can be gained from looking at these dynamics. For the second prompt, provide a geographical interpretation of the concept of culture. In your interpretation, be able to describe and demonstrate key definitions, most significant processes, and critical variables of culture. So from the text and from other sources that people have written in about, and then even myself in the mini lecture, and then in other course dialogues, discussion boards, we've came up with a few different concepts and definitions of culture. And so it's good to list and describe what some of those different definitions are, and approach a concept from various angles. I think most overarching is how we've looked at culture in terms of a combination of myths, and beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and institutions, and how these are shared amongst groups. Significant processes of culture. You can think of many of the course themes that we've looked at and how these affect different processes within culture, and critical variables such as time and place, how culture shifts through these, across these. And then so for the positioned part of this question, we look at, does culture make us unique? So you have a chance here to take a well-positioned stance on that question and elaborate on how you feel about that, as well as including references and justifiable or information that backs up your stance on this. For the third prompt, is the world crowded? So starting it right off with the question that you'll take a stance on. Describe and demonstrate the most significant processes, perceptions and realities of human populations today and in the past. So areas that might be perceived as overcrowded, how those could actually be perceived as livable and quite functioning to people who live in those cities, such as Beijing, China, or New Delhi, India, areas of extreme or very high populations, but leading some to see these areas as overcrowded, or people living there might be experiencing it much differently. So you can weigh in on those, and as well as many other cities in the world that we've talked about, places, not just city. Assess the most likely prospect for humankind's conditions, and propose at least 4 viable solutions to population issues. So you really get a chance here to incorporate areas that you're most interested in within the debates and discussions on populations, and for 4 viable solutions. Many would see a very strict previous policy of China, such as the one-child policy, as not being a viable solution, since it didn't, since it faded out, since the Chinese government saw that population stabilization was much more complex than setting a one-child policy, and that they were foreseeing future impacts of their population not being able to sustain the elderly if that population control method continued. So I wouldn't gravitate just towards the Chinese one-child policy there. We've talked about other issues such as providing equal education to women as well as men around the world, providing more education to children, including sex education, but certainly not only looking at contraceptives as a way to help foster population control. There's much broader and deeper issues that we've touched on. For number 4, geography provides unique insights into ethnicity. How do geographers interpret race and ethnicity? Again, you get to take a stance here based on the research and discussions that we've had, research that you've done, and things that we've looked at in the past weeks, using the 5 themes: cite, as in describe the location, and situate, meaning describe the human and physical landscapes of at least 3 specific examples of your new understanding of ethnicity from around the world. So hopefully we've begun to take interest in other parts of the world, as well as in our own state and country. And here's a chance to elaborate more on things that have stood out to you. Be sure to demonstrate the interactions between popular culture and ethnicity. So because of the predominance and widespread effect of popular culture today, we want to conclude this essay prompt with demonstrating some of our understanding of how these two are interacting in modern times. It's too common to think of ethnicity as traditional societies and things of the past, when really there are new and constantly unfolding iterations of how popular culture and ethnicity interact. And lastly, geographers and other social scientists say that, quote, language is the lens of culture. You might notice that each one of these essay prompts corresponds mainly, but not solely, to the different chapters that we've gone through, different weeks of our unit so far. There's an immense amount of overlap, and certainly some of what I've responded to in various weeks could be used across the board, not just solely for one thematic week at a time. So how does language shape culture and help in the study of culture? We've taken a look at a lot of different ways that this takes place, and you all have responded with very interesting cases from your own lives and things that you've been learning as well. So it's a chance to go back and review some of that information. That's how we absorb and are able to learn best, is from reviewing and integrating, not just integrating straight from reviewing, but a process of analysis in between. So these essay prompts are meant to gear you towards that. You know, it's a bit outside the box from typical college classes that we take, but this is a means to provide you with a great stepping stone to more critical thinking, and prepare you well for the other classes that you'll go on that require a bit more academic rigor in your pursuits, in academic and life pursuits as well. To get back to the question here, using geography's 5 themes, again, we're citing as far as describing location and situating at least 3 of the most significant times and places to demonstrate how language is one of the most essential pieces of the mosaic of culture. So this really allows flexibility for your own interest here, as well as in the similar to the past question. You get to select places that you feel you're able to write a lot about and provide examples of these most significant times and places. Most significant, I include that here because there's a lot of examples in the world that might just demonstrate it to some degree, but to really hone in and to put forth a strong case for why something is the most significant lends us towards, or moves us in the direction of taking a firm stance on something. And that's part of the ambition here, is to push us in that direction in a healthy and encouraging way, not in a brute or cavalier sense. And mosaic, a mosaic of culture. This is a metaphor that's commonly used in the social sciences and common day-to-day life as well. We can think of just how a art mosaic is comprised of various different colors and pieces, such as a tile mosaic, and how that then, when stepping back, forms a much larger picture. Culture and language embedded in culture are customs as well. They even say that customs are the cake of culture, being these different layers that are compiled. This provides a great metaphor for us to continue to develop our understandings of how culture varies across space and place, the patterns embedded in it, differentiation as well. And then just to continue down here on the assignment page, the outlines are graded based on the following criteria equally. So you can roughly think about, or basically think about, split between 5 criteria here, 10 points for each one. So trying to be very transparent with how your outlines will be assessed. And the questions for the essay exams are the exact same for next week, as well as the grading criteria. So content, organization, evidence, citations, and conclusions. Content that analysis demonstrates critical and analytical thinking, avoidance of generalizations that are not supported by evidence. So when we're making claims in these outlines, we really want to make sure that we're providing evidence that reinforces or supports your claims, and that the question is fully answered. The question here being the essay prompt, so that we're not forgetting to address one part of any part of the questions that's fully answered. Organization, a focused thesis. So for each essay prompt, we need a clear and concise thesis statement, followed by a coherent progression of ideas, an insightful conclusion that accurately sums up the main ideas. So just as if you were to turn each of these outlines into a full essay, you want to make sure that each of those parts of the strong essay are included. Evidence, specific examples from the required readings and class dialogue support your claims and discussions. So there's a lot of examples embedded in our discussion boards. There's examples and evidence in my responses in the discussion boards, as well as in the mini lectures and the text itself. Some other resources have been linked to in my discussions, as well as students have referred to different resources from outside the course, and you might have came across something yourself. So these are all examples of where you can pull evidence from. Citations, required reading, used. So this refers to including citations from the textbook. And cited, this should be about 1/3 of the content, roughly, as far as the evidence that you're providing to support your claims. Class dialogue should be about 1/3, and then your own interpretation and analysis being about 1/3. These are rough guidelines here for the third splits between these, but what this really speaks to is not wanting you just to provide all textbook citations for your evidence, or only pulling evidence from the class dialogues, the discussion boards, and to make sure to include your own interpretation and analysis as well, not only pulling from the book and the class dialogue. And lastly, conclusions, that they're appropriately drawn and that they show fully articulated thoughts throughout. And so we don't want cut off sentences, or if you're making a claim towards something, you want to make sure that it is fully reasoned and that it's seen through to its to all the points that it's referring to. Good way to make sure that you've met these overall criteria, to read it through to someone else and see what they think based on the claims that you're making. Family members are a great safe source for this, or maybe a friend. And it's just, really important to be talking about these issues outside of just in our course discussion boards here. The more we can talk about what we're learning with friends and family or strangers, the more it becomes incorporated into our lives, and we hear things in response from other people, and it gets us to think it through at a deeper or a different level. So that's my encouragement, would be to keep talking about this stuff, because it's really important to our world, and you're investing a lot to take this course in terms of your time and energy, finances and life. So keep up the great work, and let me know if you have any questions about this below. Okay, you can do it.